Kevin, could I invite you in to take us away through your presentation, please?
Thank you, David. All right, yeah, 225 years of Springfield history in 10 minutes. Easy, right? But this is a key year, right? It's our 225th anniversary in Springfield this year. And you can look back over the community's history in 25-year segments, which is a really interesting thing to do. They're not always perfect, but it's really interesting to see how a community evolves. We've been talking a lot about this. And also looking at some of the decisions that were made in the past and how they impacted the future, which I think really helps us think about what we're doing right now and how we're setting ourselves up, hopefully for success over the next 25 years. So, David, if you want to get us started on that first slide, as I said, I broke them down into 25-year segments. This first one is what I often call sleepy frontier town, right? Springfield has no natural advantages. It's founded in 1801. It's not on a large river. It's not on a large trading path. There's really no reason for it to succeed. It succeeds really through human ingenuity, people coming together that are really working to build a community. So this next era, 1826 to 1850, is where we really see growth in the community. I call it the era of transportation. It's the era of connectivity. In 1836, we see the arrival of the National Road. This is something that people are working on behind the scenes to make happen. This is the first interstate highway. And sometimes you also have dumb luck. Springfield was at the right spot at the right time as the federal government was disagreeing. I know that's a huge surprise to people. It's been happening across American history. And they were arguing of should states pay for it or should the federal government. They cut off funding and the road ended in Springfield. So it became the end of the first interstate highway, and we saw massive levels of growth in that period. Also in 1846, we saw the arrival of the first railroad in the state, and then 2 years later, the connecting railroad. And this is really important, something we don't talk much about in Springfield, that we really became this major hub between New York City and Cincinnati, with this connection, one of the nation's first large-scale railroad projects. And as I was saying a second ago, we saw the population growth grow quite rapidly from 1820, where it's around 500, to 1850, where it's closer to 5,000 or over 5,000. So a 10% growth over 30 years is pretty extraordinary. The population was doubling pretty much every census cycle. David, this next, if you want to move to the next one, 1851 to 1875 is really a period of industrial growth and specialization. But it's also an era of cooperation. I think there's a lot we can learn there, that idea of cooperation. In this era, we saw competing companies producing similar products decide to start working together as a community rather than competing. It's really extraordinary, I think, and I'm not an economist. I don't understand the history of this well enough across the nation, but in people I've spoken to, there's not really examples like this out there where you have our major employers decide that they're going to work together and they're going to build what I remember in economics was vertical integration, where they're going to control things together to see growth, and it works. The Civil War is in the middle of this period, and coming out of that, America is transformed, but Springfield's transformed, and we're really poised to grow, and we do. And we become the leading city in the world in this period in the production of farm machinery, when farming is the number one occupation. I often use the term because we like to find terms that resonate with people, but kind of a Silicon Valley of its day, right? Where inventors were coming here to create their products, to grow those. This is that key period in Springfield history. It's also a period, because of all of this and because of the end of the Civil War, that we see massive levels of migration and diversity. In our sessions, I think you maybe have heard David say before, a student said diversity is our superpower or can be our superpower. I would argue that started in the 1850s to the 1870s when diversity became our superpower. By 1870, or at least by 1880, we have the largest per capita Black population in the North. We also have massive populations of Irish and German immigrants. And that is what makes Springfield succeed, right? We have these big industries, we have these big ideas, but without this workforce, it's not going to work. And it's the integration of these populations, and that's really kind of the defining feature of this key 25-year segment. So then the next period, 1876 to 1890, often we'll call it a heyday of Springfield. It's important to understand that not everyone is prospering equally, right? Especially a lot of those Black and immigrant populations are really struggling. through this period. But Springfield as a whole is growing rapidly. We know this is the champion era, right? The champion city. We become one of the 100 largest cities in America in 1880 and 1890. I love to show this image because I ask students where it's at, and you think it's Paris, right? This is downtown Springfield, Ohio. So Springfield really had grand aspirations. We built a city building that is world class. We're really clicking on all cylinders, but we're really still kind of specialized in one industry, and that will come to hurt us a little bit, although we'll start to specialize in that next period. So, David, if you want to move on. This next 25-year segment is where we start to see some of this movement away from specialization as we start to see the growth of other industries in Springfield, which is really key. One of those is obviously the development of the greenhouses in Springfield, what we often call the Rose City era. Massive greenhouses selling potted roses. So we still have farm machinery. There's the growth of that. And then we start working in other areas. We start working and bringing in what today we would call healthcare, right? With what we call the home city, becoming the home for orphans and widows across the state of Ohio and the development of these types of things. Springfield's political capital grows greatly with the governor and the governor's office, and we're able to really kind of have Ohio decisions that are impacting Springfield and helping us greatly. But there's also a key thing that happens in this period, and it's the development of the trust, right? These massive American corporations, and when these things start happening, Springfield starts losing control of the decision making. And when you start losing control of the decision making, the decisions are not always helpful for Springfield. This is also a period where we start to see growing mistrust based on our divisions. We see legalized segregation. We see these things take root in our community. We often today call them hate, right? That really starts to create this seed of division in the community that starts to break apart Springfield, including 3 race riots in this period that really start to hurt Springfield quite greatly. But there's still altogether pretty massive levels of civic pride by a lot of the key community leaders that kind of pull us through it. So, David, the next one. The next era, 25 years, 1826 to 1850, we see that continued diversification of industry, right? This is Kroll Collier. We see the growth of the publishing houses in America, not just this one, but a number of other smaller ones. And we're really working in now 3 major industries, and we see continued levels of growth. By the end of the 1850s, where our population is really almost at a peak, and we also see the growth of a lot of new populations, including new Black Southerners that are trying to escape the Jim Crow policies of the South, as long as white Appalachian migrants. I work with one of those historically with the Hartman Rock Garden, right? People that are coming in looking for better opportunities and finding them at Kroll Collier and International Harvester and all the factories that are here. And of course, we have a massive world war at the end of this period, and we see a major housing boom coming out of that here in Springfield. But again, the continued loss of control. David, the next. So then 1851 to 1875, our population really peaks by about 1955 at about 83,000. And then we'll start going down by 1860, but it's still higher than it was in 1950. But that population will continue to decline for the next 50 years. So over the next 2, 25-year segments. This is spurred by the closing of Kroll Collier, that factory on the previous page. And I think we're, as a community, seeing that when all those jobs or many of those jobs are employed by one major company, it can create turmoil, right, if that company leaves. But we also see then steady decline in other industries. It's not that Springfield just falls off a cliff the way that Pittsburgh or Detroit kind of does, but this steady decline, 200 jobs lost here, 50 jobs lost there. And we also see kind of legacy industry that's here in Springfield shifting into other modes of production. So we see a period of decline, but it's not massive decline. It's this slow, steady decline over that period that will then really pick up steam in the next cycle. So David, if you want to move to the next one. Perhaps this photo is unfair for those of you that have lived and spent a lot of your life in Springfield in the 1970s through through 2000. But this is a period of decline in almost every imaginable sense in Springfield. We see the demolition of much of our built environment. This is actually that same building that I showed on the previous slide as it's being demolished. We demolish about 90% of our downtown, and we start to reimagine how a city might look and act. You might think I'm incredibly critical of that period. I'm actually pretty impressed by community leaders and how they're trying to pivot and find new ways of success. We ultimately don't really find those the way we want, but they tried, right? They were trying in really interesting ways. But part of it, we still continue to see this division between North and South, between have and have not, between white and black. We see kind of the breakdown of the structure of Springfield that I think leads us into further decline, right? And you see that in cities that are declining and obviously continued job loss. But thankfully, we were able to retain some of our major employers in this period, like International Harvester, that decides to stay here instead of moving to Fort Wayne, Indiana. And then this is all to set us up to the most recent period. So, David, if you want to move to my last slide, and this is really an era of renewal. We hear a lot of people down on Springfield, and I can understand there's still a lot of things we need to be doing. But when you look at the last 25 years of Springfield history, we will look back, future historians, my children, if they decide to go into this field, will look back on this era and really, I think, look at it as the period where Springfield turned around. There's still a lot that we need to do, but a lot of this has been spurred by philanthropic support in the community, right? The creation of the Turner Foundation, my employer, and a bunch of other foundations in town that are able to invest in growth. So we've seen a lot of planning efforts that have happened in this. RUDAT was happening right as I was coming into town, but then also Greater Springfield moving forward, the Chamber's work, the growth of the Greater Springfield Partnership, the Chamber, and then heavy investments in arts and culture. Massive, massive investments from the Heritage Center opening in 2001, Westcott House in 2005, Gammon House, Summer Arts Festival, all of the infrastructure there, the Springfield Museum of Art, the restoration of the Hartman Rock Garden, the re-restoration of the Pennsylvania House, and of course the Performing Arts Center was right before this period, but group that in as well. Just a massive level and changing the identity of Springfield, which was vital on setting us up for this later period of bringing in new industry, but then also a complete focus on downtown Springfield, including a new hotel, the revitalization of the Bushnell Building, the North Fountain Avenue Commercial District, really investing in what makes Springfield special, which is, I think, what has really set us up for this, what now we're going into on this next 25 year, which is what this entire project is about. So I hope you've enjoyed, and I'm not confused to have tried to cover 225 years of history in only 10 minutes. But I really think it helps us understand where we've been, the successes and failures, and really set us up for where we're going to be going over the next 25 years. So,
Kevin, thank you very much. Right, that was absolutely fascinating. In fact, I think we should pull that out and do that as a separate little kind of video on the website, because I think what I kept hearing as you went through that was it resonates with so much that we hear even today that people are hitting on things like you talking about the transportation, the importance of the transportation, and sort of the end of the interstate, and all those components, the diversity issues, right? And I think, my observation in Springfield, both from what I hear from people and what I heard from your presentation, is about that resilience, that ability to be able to ride and correct course and to reinvent. And there's been so much work, even in those, like you say, in the last 25 years, of people coming together to meet a moment, to meet a need, to do the planning, put resources, think differently, and invest. So I think that's a fantastic context. So thank you.